Good morning, Philippa. How are you on this wonderful sunny day? Look at that sun shining in on you.
I know it's literally rising on one side of my face, but it may get brighter as we talk through today.
Well, that's great. The sun always shines on the righteous, as they say. So that's amazing. Well, listen, I've got my glass of water here and I've had a very wet morning. I've already been in the North Sea and had the most amazing start to the day with a sea swim at 6 o'clock this morning. So I'm raring to go, but I will apologize if within 10 minutes I start snoring.
Yeah, you're putting me to shame with your up early routine. I think I'm still a bit of the later starter, and then I much prefer my evening walks, particularly when it's so sunny. It's a nice way to go to make the most of our longer days. So.
Absolutely. And do you know what? You know, I'm a miracle morning girl and I love my 5 o'clock starts. And now it's light every morning. So it's no problem jumping out of bed. And it's really interesting because it's made me think about that consistency piece, about how I've been through the hard work now, those winter mornings when it's been dark and wet and cold and horrible. But the consistency of keep doing it and keep going with it, which is something I know both of us have spoken to various clients about, the consistency of setting up those habits, doing that little 1% marginal gain change and what the difference that can make.
Yeah.
However, today in episode 5, so we have consistently got to episode 5 in our first series. We're going to talk about the ending of the coaching relationship and what that looks like, how that practically happens, what that feels like for both of us, because for both the coach and the coachee, there will be a different response, and what happens next. And I'm quite interested in this because it's really important that the ending of the relationship and of the contract, let's remember we've set a contract in place, is managed well. So, question to you, Philippa.
I'm
How
ready.
do you, she's ready, let's go. How do you manage the ending when it comes to that time with one of your clients? And what does that feel like? And how do you make sure that you stay ethical in your approach?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. It's a funny one as well, though, isn't it? Because we've talked a lot already in the previous podcasts about the building the relationship. And usually you'd say you're building a relationship so it's a lasting one that continues forever. And this is one where you go, no, there is expected to be an ending. So I think that is one thing maybe to just put on the table is there is an expectation that you'll go off a better person from the coaching experience than you were when you started, being able to perform, in a different way. But it is about the fact that you start the relationship, but then there's an expectation that it will come to an end, and usually it's quite a natural end, I would say. Typically, when I've been working with coachees, then we contract for 5 or 6 sessions. We do agree that if we wanted to, we can stop, earlier. We could carry on, recontract for a little longer. But the objective really is to try and actually make an impact for them that is going to be lasting. Typically, when we're having the coaching relationship, we tend to get together every 4 to 6 weeks. So overall, then you look at it being sort of a 6 to 8 month relationship that you're going on as a coach and a coachee, which is when the lasting change really happens, where you get the change in behaviours,
Mm.
and you can really get them embedded. And we always would end with a let's look at those initial objectives and have we achieved what we needed to against them? Have we achieved some more? Or is there something more that we need to work on? Is it the end, or is it that there's a continuation? So it's about reviewing and evaluating. Have you got where you needed to be, where you wanted to be by the end of this coaching relationship? And say ending feels really abrupt. It's not like, you just go to the end of the cliff and you jump off. Then it is a transition, maybe a bit of a cliche. It could be a new beginning for the coachee as well, as they go off into the world in their better self, their form of their better self. But in terms of how it feels, If I think about when I was coached, I had that moment with oh, I'm not quite ready to release my coach. There's a few things I want to chat through. And I do remember when we were due to have our last session, I'd actually wanted to talk through some stuff with a new team. I had a new team that was forming, and I wanted to just validate it, use him as a bit of a sounding board. But he wasn't available for I think 2 or 3 months actually, due to certain circumstances, which meant I had to go off and do what I wanted to. And then when we did come back, and I'd said this is what I was going to talk about, then it was quite nice that he'd said, "Yeah, but you did it all by yourself, and you know you did it by yourself." So that's sort of helped with the ending of the relationship almost. So I do think it can be difficult from a coachee point of view, but it's the part of you standing on your own and being confident in your new abilities, of what you've sort of unlocked. But as a coach as well, I think it can be difficult because you don't necessarily see the full impact of what's happening with that individual once they leave the coaching relationship. And I mean, I'm sure you're the same, Theresa, but I know in the first episode, then I talked about what are the things which really motivate me about being a coach is, about the change and the people development. And it's only if you're getting, or if you see someone another 2, 3 months down the track that you might be really understanding what the full impact has been. You do an evaluation as you end the relationship, but I don't know if you've had the same experience of actually it's nice sometimes when you reconnect a few months later and they've had some time for reflection. They've been putting into practice some of the learning and the growth that they've had during coaching, and they then reflect back to you, which is where I found it really powerful. So
Oh,
maybe.
absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with you. And do you know what? I'm so glad you've said that because it's reminded me that in episode 6, which is obviously our next episode, which will be the last one of this series, we're going to have some of our previous clients come on so that they can talk to our listeners about their journey with us as coaches, but also their journey as a coach, full stop coachee, sorry. And then next series, we're going to do a series 2. It will all episodes will have somebody that we're talking to that has had coaching,
Yeah.
and let's hear it from their point of view rather than just hearing it from us, because you're quite right when you said it's so good to see a few months down the line, maybe a year or even 2 years down the line, the impact that you as a coach have had on somebody's development, whether that be lifestyle, personal, or professional development, is amazing. And when you talked about coming to the end and reflecting and looking back at the goals, you might have had strategic goals or personal goals, or not really sure what was going on, but something happened. Certainly in my practice, and every coach will do it differently. I always will send a coaching log after every session, so you've got something to refer back to, and things that we agreed on that you wanted to have a look at as a coachee. And it's great in that final session to go back to session 1, review, have a look, see what was happening, and see the journey that you've been on, which is just tremendous. And that's so powerful. And
Mm.
those moments of where they go, gosh, I'd forgotten that. And now look, is
Yeah.
just tremendous. But you're quite right. It's quite an emotional thing. You've spent a lot of time with this person and you've both been, well, they've definitely been vulnerable, and you've allowed this safe space, and it becomes a bit personal. You have to keep it on the professional, but it becomes a bit personal. And we're empathetic human beings, Philippa, you and I. And therefore, you've built this relationship, but it does have to end, but it ends in a good way. It is not a breakup. It is
No.
not the end. It's not a divorce.
And I don't know whether you've had the same thing, like you said, we obviously there's previous people that we've coached that we're still in touch with. There's still a little bit of the tie, isn't there? And I must say, I've felt quite comfortable reaching out to my previous coach as well, and actually have also become a sponsor for somebody else to then be coached. So I think there's also it's sort of an evolution of the ending of one relationship could then spin into the start of a new one as well. So even though it feels like endings, it's a bit cutthroat, then actually, I said transition or new beginnings, I think can hold quite true. And it's quite rewarding, I think, when you see also a coachee that then grows into a sponsor, and you can go into supporting their team members in the same way.
Absolutely. And when you said the word sponsor, there might be a few of our listeners that don't actually know what that means. So a sponsor is, in essence, if you put somebody forward for coaching, so you are their sponsor into the program. And in my training, when we were doing our training, I had a long review session with one of my coachee sponsors about how they'd seen the process from their point of view. And one of the things that she said to me was, it would be really good to have a session so that we can, all three of us, review what's gone on without breaking confidentialities. And she was quite honest. She said, because at the end of the day, I'm signing the check.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's quite important. And I do raise that with my coachees and say, obviously, everything that's in our sessions is confidential, will not be fed back to anybody. However, it would be useful potentially to have a three-way session where we look at what's been achieved and see if your sponsor sees it from the same place. But that would only happen if the coachee said, yes, please.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of that. It's almost there's some safe hands as well that coachee is going to say, well, this is what has been worked on. This is the growth that we've seen, and they've also got someone who's working with them each day who can be their own little coach as well, in order to sort of just make sure there's any reminders or that they've got as a sounding board again. Well, this is what I'm trying to achieve, and are there times where I'm falling into old behaviours, or that there's some encouragement to keep with the new mindset, new behaviours that have been unleashed through the coaching.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I often find we're rolled in as coaches in sort of like the A&E department. So as things are going downhill, a bit pear-shaped, they roll us in, give us a client, and it's amazing at what we see. However, I'm so keen to stress that roll us in when things are good, because then they're going to get better. And
Yeah,
the transformation from good to better, or what would you say, better to best? I think that's the phrase, isn't it? Better to best is even more transformational. And
mm,
as a coach, we love that. We absolutely love it. So we've ended our relationship with coach and coachee. Thank goodness we aren't ending our relationship, Philippa. This is going to go on and on. So, listeners, strap in for the journey with us. As we close today's podcast, episode 5, what would you say is our main message today?
So I think the main message is it is a professional contract, and the aim is for the coachee to leave the sessions that we have in a better place than when they started. There is an end for this time. And just like any relationship, it can be rekindled if you have a new set of goals, if you become a sponsor, as you've just talked about, for your team members, or in advocating to other leaders as well, or you just need a check-in. So still opportunities to rekindle, keep in touch, but it's good to actually go through that cycle to make sure that you're released as a coachee to go and be the best that you can.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Okay, so we're not ending. Tune in 2 weeks' time for our last episode in this series where you will get to see some of the people. So we won't have our little pictures on the page. We'll have a real person sat beside us as we talk about what they got out of coaching with Philippa and coaching with myself, and how that's helped build themselves, but also build their teams. We're really looking forward to that. So for now, thank you for joining us. Fingers crossed the sun is still shining.
It's
And
definitely, I've had to even move my screen. It was shining so much, right in my eyes.
And I'm off now to go and make sure I'm completely dry after my sea swim.
All right, I'll catch
Take
up with you
care.
next time. See you later.
Bye.